I was getting ready to go to history class when Casey whispered to me, giggling, "Did you hear? Stefan's dad works with the CIA." Things were getting unbearable. Every day, a new rumor weirder than the last emerged. At first, Stefan said that he went to jail, and that when he got out, his family couldn't live with the shame he brought them. So they sent him to a school far from them. And before that, he said that his family were secret assassins that no one knew about, and that they came into the city on a secret mission. If it was so big of a secret, how come he told us about it? And now this. Stefan told me a lot about his parents once he started going to our school. And believe me when I say they were nothing like the things they were being said about them. It was the exact opposite of anything you might have in mind. The truth behind his family was shockingly hilarious to me. And the reason was unbelievable. Just like a bedtime story. Stefan and I hadn't been going out for even 2 weeks, and the rumors were already spreading around. We were both the talk of the month. Frankly, Stefan was a very handsome guy with an athletic body. I was the opposite. I looked like a 4th grade girl with my childish face and tiny figure. That's why we made an odd couple, but I couldn't have cared less about what others thought. What was important to me was that we were both happy. If I'm being honest, I didn't know if my relationship with Stefan would work. He still hadn't asked me officially out on a date. He was content in hanging around in school and during the break, and he was not the shy type either. Maybe I wasn't the kind of girl that makes the first move with guys, but I really wanted to go out with Stefan and get to know him better. So I collected myself and went toward him, then said, "So, Stefan, do you want to go out with me for some ice cream after school? It'll be on our way home." He answered, "I don't know. I don't think it's a good idea. Ice cream damages the teeth." This was the weirdest thing I had ever heard. He could have just said no with a better excuse. At first, I thought he was joking, so I laughed, but he looked way too serious. I tried to insist, but he told me that he had an important thing with his family during the day, so he couldn't make it. I left annoyed, but then Casey told me that Stefan wasn't from around here, that maybe where he was from, guys like to wait and take it easy with their relationships. But I thought differently. I thought Stefan wasn't interested in me as much as I was in him. What Casey told me made me think this through. I mean, if he wanted to break up with me, he simply would, right? Besides, I was also busy that day. Ever since my dad bought his toy store, I had been working there part-time until he could find someone good with children. I went home, changed, and then headed straight to the shop. You will not believe who I found there. Stefan was holding an older lady's hand and pointing at a toy on the shelf. This was the important thing he had to do and passed on going out with me for? Buying toys? He definitely didn't know that this was my father's store. I never mentioned it in front of him. "Stefan," I called him. He looked around and dropped the lady's hand hurriedly. "What are you doing here?" I didn't expect his response. He lied straight to my face. He said that he and his mom were buying some toys for his kid brother. He told me when we first got to know each other that he was an only child, that his parents had him after 13 years of being married, and they couldn't have another. Could that woman have been his girlfriend? Was he one of those weirdos who liked women who were as old as his own mom? He was holding her hand very fondly. If that wasn't the case, why did he freak out when he saw me? I kept thinking about this whole ordeal the entire day. I couldn't find an answer till I called Casey at night and asked her about it. She told me that his parents could have adopted someone. He never mentioned it to me, but he also never denied it. Once again, Casey succeeded in waving away my worries. She was really good at that. A long time passed without me broaching the subject. I thought that with time he'd explain what had happened, but he didn't. My friends and I decided to go camping after the school year was over, since none of us had any plans for the summer. Cool, right? The clear sky shone above us, and we circled around the fire, eating s'mores and telling ghost stories behind the lake. We were gonna have so much fun together. All of us agreed to join except one. That's right, you knew it, Stefan. Stefan looked terrified as we talked about the bugs in the woods, and that it was essential to buy some spray. He didn't explain why he refused. Everybody felt that Stefan just didn't want to hang out with anyone. He pissed me off. I stood and told him, face erupting like a volcano. "What? We are not good enough for you to come hang out with us? Camping damages the teeth?" So Stefan, in order to calm me down, agreed to go with us. However, during the camping day, he texted me saying that he was sick and that he wouldn't make it. I tried calling him several times, but his phone was out of service. I felt really disappointed and worried about his health. Then I started getting suspicious of him again. I knew he was hiding something from me. Maybe he was going out with that lady from the store and thought with me out of the picture for several days, he could hang out with her easily. I would not be the stupid. I would not allow someone like Stefan to mess with me this way. I went directly to his house without telling him that I was coming. It was the first time I ever went inside his home. Usually we parted ways on his doorstep on our way home from school. With every step driving me closer to his door, my heart beat faster. My instinct told me that I was going to witness a disaster. But what I saw, I couldn't believe my eyes. Even the silliest bedtime stories couldn't have told what I saw. I rang the bell a few times, but no one answered. So I thought about leaving, but I didn't want to stay angry the whole trip. I started banging on the door harder and harder. I didn't mean to open it, it just did. "Stefan! Stefan!" I called, but no one answered. I went inside, and I heard calm music from deep within. Was it possible he was spending a romantic night with candles and music with that old hag? Don't be silly, I told myself. He won't cheat on me inside his own house. All along the way to the bedroom, I found toys tossed everywhere. When I entered the room, I saw a picture of me and my friends and Stefan hung on the wall. It was without a doubt his room. I saw a photo of a kid on the counter, and it looked just like Stefan. Could Stefan have had a son? No, that was impossible. Did he buy his toys from our store for his son? What a lying, deceiving... I was gonna get out of the room, but then I saw a crib. And what I saw inside the crib made me pee myself from laughter. It was Stefan. He was wearing a onesie, had a sucker in his mouth, and was looking at me completely shocked. I couldn't stop myself. I started laughing until I had tears in my eyes. I fell on the floor and held my stomach. What the heck was he doing? I could barely hear his voice calling me. He held me with both of his hands and started shaking me. "How did you get in here, you lunatic? And what's so funny?" he asked. I looked at him and said, "Don't you know how ridiculous you look? You have that in your mouth. What are those? Are you wearing diapers? What kind of joke is this?" I exploded once again. I stopped once I heard his mom saying, "My sweet cupcake, I'm back home. Come, let Mommy make you the best and sweetest hot chocolate in the entire world." I was so shocked, my mouth fell right open. A woman entered. She was the same one from the store. She was really his mom. Even though she saw me, that didn't stop her from talking to him like a baby. She went to his side, kissed him as she pinched his cheek, and said, "Who is the cutest baby in the entire world? Yes, you are. Aw, yes, you are. How's the kindest baby? How's my baby boy? Is it you, darling, my baby boy?" Was she crazy or something? Stefan asked me to wait for him in the guest room. And after a few minutes, he came out wearing normal clothes. He looked worried. Even I was worried. Him getting caught cheating on me would have been easier than this. I didn't know what kind of excuse he would tell me, but what I saw wasn't a dress-up party or a Halloween. It was literally his lifestyle. He held my hand as he told me everything. Stefan didn't want a normal life. He wanted to stay a kid forever. Maybe he wasn't like that in the beginning, but the way his family spoiled him and turned him into a lunatic... Oh, he wanted to live in Neverland, where children never grow up. But that wasn't possible. Time passes and we grow older. We can't stay children forever. Add to that, Stefan was ruining the best time of his life. He told me he didn't want anyone to know about this. At his previous school, he told a friend of his who ratted him out, and he ended up being the school's joke. So he changed schools, and now he's frightened that he'd have to move schools again because of me. He also told me that the reason he couldn't go camping with us was because he couldn't sleep away from his mom. What I thought was funny at first glance turned out to be completely sad. I don't think Stefan really comprehends what he's doing. He really just likes the attention, living like a child and playing with toys all day long. Stefan lived way too long being deprived of a normal life. So he can't possibly understand the fun behind dating and eating ice cream without any limits and camping in the woods. But at the end of the day, it is his lifestyle. Who am I to judge? Yes, I felt sad for missing out on a normal relationship with him. I really liked him. However, I promised him I'd keep his secret. When I was saying goodbye, he offered me a box of food as a little experiment on his way of living. And I gotta admit, it was 1,000 times better than adult food. So, what did you think of my story? I would like to hear your opinions and thoughts. Also, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories.
The email I was reading felt like poison. Suddenly, everything I thought I knew about my life had come crashing down. I couldn't trust anyone anymore. I just stared at the email with no idea about how this could have happened and what it meant for me. You may be wondering what this email was and why it had such a life-changing impact on me. Well, let me backtrack a bit. You see, there was this awesome exchange program that my school was doing with a school in China, and for as long as I can remember, I've been obsessed with the Far East. Anyway, I was dying to go on this trip, and because my grades were pretty good, I qualified for a scholarship. My mom wasn't exactly rolling in cash, but because it was all paid for, she couldn't say no, right? The problem was that I needed a passport. Yep, I was 14 and I didn't have a passport. I hadn't thought it was that weird before, but now that I had to go through the whole process of applying for one, it made me wonder why my mom hadn't done it when I was a kid, like everyone else's parents had done. The list of documents needed for a passport was so long, and because I was only 14, I needed my mom's birth certificate and her ID and stuff. The trip was in a month, so I needed to apply quickly if I wanted to get it in time. Mom was seriously not keen for me to go. She kept saying that I was too young, what if something happened to me, or what if the plane crashed? She was being so annoying. Why couldn't she just hand over her certificates to me? Why make it so difficult? If I'd had a dad, it would have been a lot easier. I could have just used his ID. But I never knew my dad, and he already died, so that wasn't even an option. I kept begging my mom to let me go, and then one evening, she started sobbing and explained the real reason why I wouldn't be able to go. Her birth certificate had been lost in a fire when she was a young girl, and she'd never applied for a new one. She said it was really tricky to get a new one, and it could take months, and she didn't want to let me down, so she had kept this from me. To be honest, it just seemed so irresponsible to me. It was already bad enough that all the other kids at school teased me about my mom, without adding this to the pile, too. The thing is, my mom is really old, like grandma old. I've always been teased about it because my mom had me when she was 50. So now she's like 64, but she looks way older. I asked her about it once and she looked a bit upset, but then she said she just aged quicker than other people because she'd had a tough life and that raising a child as a single mom wasn't easy. I couldn't miss this trip. It meant so much to me. I needed to come up with a plan. If Mom won't get a new birth certificate, then I just have to find another way. I started Googling fake birth certificates. I never expected it to bring up any results, but it did. And there was even an email address for some guy who did this. How was this even legal? Well, I didn't really care about that. All I wanted was to go on the trip. I decided to email him. I told him what I needed. I sent him Mom's date of birth and the town she was born in. And then I waited. A whole week went by and I heard nothing. I was getting so impatient. And at this rate, my dream of going to China would never happen. I was sitting in the basement one night when my phone lit up. It was the fake certificate guy. He'd emailed back. I could barely contain my excitement as I opened up the email. I saw he'd attached something and I knew it must have been the fake certificate. I clicked on it and waited for it to download. There it was. Yes, I thought I could easily get my passport now. I went to email him back to say thank you, and that's when I noticed he'd written me an email. I read it and felt my blood run cold. Dear Clarissa, thank you for your email. I'm afraid I don't offer my services to minors, and as you can see, your mom already has a fake birth certificate. In fact, she contacted me about 15 years ago to get one made, so perhaps you should speak to her about it. I hope this doesn't cause any problems. All the best, Mr. Blackthorpe. I didn't understand. Why had my mom had a fake birth certificate made? This made no sense. Why had she lied to me? And 15 years ago? That was just before I was born. So many questions were running through my mind as I ran up the stairs to speak to her. She was in the kitchen cooking, and I stormed in there, giving her the fright of her life. You liar! I screamed at her. I didn't even wait for her to react. I ran out into the garden and opened the email again. Then I looked closer at the birth certificate. It really was my mom's. The next moment I looked up and my mom was walking towards me. Before I could say anything more, my mom interrupted me, and that's when things got a whole lot worse. Clarissa, it's not what you think. I just hid it there because I didn't want you to know my real age. Now it was my turn to interrupt her. Wait, what? I said. The suitcase. I know it looks bad, all those documents, but I didn't have a choice. How else could I have had a baby? The doctors wouldn't exactly let a 64-year-old give birth, she said between sobs. She was crying a lot, and I just stared at her. What was she talking about? Suddenly I felt like we weren't on the same page at all. I have no idea what suitcase you're going on about, but do you remember a Mr. Blackthorpe, Mom? I said, almost spitting my words out in anger. Mom's face went ghostly white, and that's when she realized the mistake she just made. I couldn't even bear to be around her. I started walking away from her, feeling disgusted, and then as I reached the garden gate, I turned around to her and said, You know what, Mom? You're the most selfish person I've ever met. How could you lie to me all these years? If you had me when you were 64, that means you're 78 now. Do you know how messed up that is? You're even older than all my friends' grandmas. Why wait so long? You should never have even had me. I could hear Mom crying out to me as I walked through the gate, but I didn't care. I needed to get as far away from her as possible. But what she said then sent shivers up my spine. Clarissa, please, don't go. I dreamt about having a child like you for 64 years. When you were born, you gave me a reason to keep on living. Without you, I wouldn't have survived this long. I turned around to face her. There were tears running down her cheeks, and she looked so small and frail standing next to the tree. She was 78. This was crazy. Please let me explain, she begged. If it hadn't been for what she just said, I'd have run away. But the thought of her being so old, it killed me. Then she told me her whole story. Ever since she was a young girl, she dreamt of having a child, but she'd just never met the right guy. The clock was ticking, and one day she woke up and she was 40, and her panic really set in, so she decided to freeze her eggs and wait for a donor to come along. But no donor ever came, and by then it was too late anyway. Menopause had come and gone, and the next thing, she was waking up and it was her 60th birthday. She couldn't take it any longer. After 3 years of searching and searching, she found a Swedish man who was willing, but there was just one tiny problem. Absolutely no doctor would agree to do this kind of procedure on a 63-year-old, and so she did what any desperate person would, just like me. She contacted a certain Mr. Blackthorpe and had a fake certificate made. The whole time she was telling me this, she was crying and shaking. I just stared at her and listened. I was so shocked. I couldn't believe she'd done this. First, she had lied about her age, then she'd lied about me having a dad who died, and now the lies just kept on coming. What would be next? I was so angry with her. I couldn't stand there any longer listening to all these lies. I ran back into the garden towards the house, barging past her, and went straight to my room. I didn't want to be anywhere near her. My mom knew better than to come and look for me. How could she have been so selfish? She was 78! That meant she could die in a few years, and then what? I'd be left all alone. It's not like I could even go look for my father. He was just some anonymous donor from Sweden. It all made sense now. The reason my mom was so against me getting a passport. If the authorities find out she'd used a fake certificate all those years ago, she could be in serious trouble. She could even go to prison. Honestly, she was the most selfish person I'd ever met. I felt so trapped. I couldn't go on my trip, and I felt like I'd be stuck in this house forever, all because of some stupid lie she'd told so she could have a baby. I refused to speak to her. Days went by, and still I wouldn't even look at her. One morning I was lying on my bed thinking about it all when something was slipped under my door. It was my mom's original birth certificate. I realized that day after school I had my passport appointment. I'd completely forgotten about it, but maybe I could still go and get it. I was still so angry at my mom that I didn't even care about the consequences. That day at school dragged by. We had a substitute teacher for our literature class, and she really bugged me at first. She was so bubbly and positive, and I just wasn't in the mood for everything she kept saying. She even wrote a quote on the board that said, "Enjoy life while you can. It can be taken in a heartbeat." I barely listened in the class, but I couldn't stop staring at the quote. It was getting under my skin. As we left the class, the teacher said, "Don't forget to chase your dreams. Chase them hard." I went to my locker to get my stuff and headed towards the door. It was time for my appointment. I climbed onto my bicycle and suddenly I couldn't even pedal. What was I doing? This wasn't right. I knew what I had to do. I kept thinking about what my mom had said about me giving her a reason to live. I cycled home so fast that when I saw my mom sitting by the window, I burst into tears. No trip in the world was worth losing my mom over. I ran through the door and went straight over to her and gave her the biggest hug ever. The trip could wait. The most important thing was that my mom was safe. I would never be able to live with myself if I got her in trouble. I was her dream. She'd waited her whole life for me to come along, and I wasn't about to throw it all away for her. If I had to wait 4 more years until I turned 18 and could apply for my own passport, then so be it. After that, my relationship with my mom changed for the better. I appreciated every single moment with her now because I know how long she waited for me. I don't know how much time we have left together, but I just want to make the most of it. And as for Mr. Blackthorpe, I guess I'm grateful in a way. Without him, I wouldn't be here today, and I also wouldn't have learned the truth about my mom. What do you think of my story? Please share your comments below, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories.